Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on February 26, 2026.
Mathematician, we walked into that clinic where they're giving that money out to these people that are in the most dire straits of poverty and sickness, and told them that the money was coming from a, what are you, class 3 sexual predator?
Tier 1.
Was tier 1's the highest and worst?
No, I'm
The lowest?
I'm the lowest.
You're the lowest. Okay, tier 1, you're the lowest. But a criminal.
Yes.
That the money came from them. What percentage of people do you estimate? I understand you don't like probabilities. Do you estimate would say, I don't care, I want the money for my children?
I would say everyone said, I want the money for my children.
Did they know where the money came from?
I think if you told them,
if
I told them the devil,
100%.
the devil
himself
said, I'm going to exchange some dollars for your child's life.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
So did Jeffrey Epstein regard himself as the devil? What you just saw is an excerpt from a video released by the Department of Justice 1 month ago. The video is a small part of 15 hours of Epstein interviews conducted by Steve Bannon in 2019. Bannon, the former chief strategist for Donald Trump, conducted the interviews only a few months before Epstein was finally arrested by the FBI. The US government claims that Epstein died in August of that year and that he took his own life in a heavily monitored jail cell, or at least a jail cell that ought to have been heavily monitored. In a few minutes, you'll find out if Jeffrey Epstein did regard himself as the devil. And in this report, I'll also share with you other highlights from this nearly 2-hour exercise in depravity. Now, why is this video so important? Its importance doesn't lie so much in what it reveals about Epstein. We already knew that he was a sick human being. Its primary importance lies rather in what it reveals about the powerful men who befriended Epstein, including Steve Bannon himself. Many of those men are alive today, and none of them has been held truly accountable for any misconduct in which he may have engaged. Before I get into it, please remember to like and share this video if you find it to be informative. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please become one and help us to expand the reach of our unapologetic resistance journalism. We're on the cusp of breaking through 130,000 subscribers, and we hope that you'll join our fine audience of subscribers in the days ahead. Now, there's some confusion as to why Bannon conducted and recorded this interview, which Bannon himself never published. In a statement, Bannon said that he encouraged Mr. Epstein to speak to 60 Minutes, and that Bannon had recorded more than 15 hours of interviews with Epstein as more or less practice for a 60 Minutes interview. That explanation raised an uncomfortable question for Bannon, however. If his 15 hours of interviews with Epstein were a form of practice for a 60 Minutes interview, doesn't that suggest that Bannon wanted to help Epstein to rehabilitate his reputation, and to do so even though Epstein continued to commit pedophiliac crimes after his release from prison in 2009? Bannon has also suggested that these 15 hours of footage were part of a documentary that he planned to make about Epstein. But if that's true, then why didn't Bannon publish this documentary by now, after all these interviews took place about 7 years ago, and Bannon has had plenty of time to complete his supposed documentary? The publication of this interview raises other questions. For example, why has the Department of Justice published only 2 of the 15 hours of interviews conducted by Bannon? And why did it choose to publish these 2 hours of interviews rather than some other portion of Bannon's interviews? Now, before I show you what I regard as the highlights from this 2-hour video, we should recall that a central theme of the Epstein narrative is that Epstein was a financial genius possessing unparalleled acumen about capital markets. Epstein's genius, we are told, is the reason that powerful and wealthy men spent so much time with him, and in some cases gave Epstein so much money. Those powerful and wealthy men include Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Leon Black, and Les Wexner. They also include Jess Staley, the former JP Morgan executive who became the CEO of Barclays, the British mega bank, in 2015. We've also learned more recently that Epstein was apparently a friend of Jeff Bezos and the Google guys, and very close to David Rockefeller. And the list of powerful men who frequented Epstein's company goes on and is not fully yet revealed. Now, if in fact Epstein was not a financial genius, then these and other powerful actors have some mansplaining to do. They need a new explanation for why they spent so much time with Epstein and why some of them paid Epstein so much money. Was it because Epstein was trafficking children to them? Was it because Epstein was blackmailing them? Was it because he was a valuable intelligence asset for the CIA and the Mossad with very important links to other powerful actors? Or is it some combination of these things or none of them whatsoever? These questions remain unanswered and are all the more compelling because the evidence does not support at all the narrative that Epstein's financial acumen was extraordinary. As I've explained in prior reports about the Epstein scandal, the claim that Epstein was a financial genius is dubious in the extreme. When Epstein sought and obtained a job at the now defunct Wall Street bank Bear Stearns, he lied about having 2 degrees from 2 California universities. When Bear Stearns learned about the lie and that the universities had never even heard of Epstein, they confronted him, and he then admitted that he had in fact lied. Epstein never obtained so much as a bachelor's degree from any university. Despite Epstein's lack of a university degree, he was hired to be a math instructor by the Dalton School, which is reputed to be a prestigious private institution. The man who hired him was Donald Barr, a man who wrote a creepy science fiction book called Space Relations, in which Barr exhibited a fixation with sexualizing adolescents. Donald Barr also happens to be the father of William Barr, who was Trump's attorney general when Epstein supposedly committed suicide. In any case, in 1976, Epstein was dismissed from Dalton for poor performance. Then, after lying his way into Bear Stearns, he was asked to leave Bear Stearns for committing an unspecified regulatory violation. The excerpt of Bannon's interview of Epstein, which the DOJ has published, makes no mention of Epstein lying about his education, his poor performance at Dalton, or his misbehavior at Bear Stearns. At least the part we know about doesn't mention any of these things. And if Bannon's intention was to do a tell-all about the life of Epstein, it's inexcusable that he would leave out these critically relevant facts while at the same time promoting, as he did repeatedly throughout this 2-hour video, the narrative that Epstein was a man of extraordinary intelligence. Bannon, in fact, goes out of his way to express amazement at Epstein's financial acumen. During the interview, Bannon describes Epstein as a financial genius, a member of the high priesthood of finance, and the smartest guy in the room. For example, there's this exchange, which revolves around the great financial crisis in 2008. At that time, Epstein was serving a sentence for a sexual crime involving a minor.
Sunday afternoon, because I want to find out about people, the geniuses understanding the complexity of the financial system. Because I think the best example we have is the financial crisis, the crash of 2008. Sunday afternoon, September 14th, I think it was, 2008, is when they were working feverishly in Midtown Manhattan at the Lehman Brothers offices and at various law firms around town, and with the Secretary of Treasury and the Federal Reserve, what they're going to do with Lehman. They decided they weren't going to save it. And so they prepared to put it into bankruptcy at the open of the market in London the next day. How did you hear about what was going to happen to Lehman Brothers, and what did you immediately think when you heard that it was going to be put into bankruptcy?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was in solitary confinement September 14th. And again, some of the public stories about the wonderful time I had in jail and my work release, which didn't come till months after. I'd been there since June in an 8x10 cell with a bed in the back, a 6-foot bed in the back, a chrome sink with a toilet attached to it, and a little piece of metal sticking out that was supposed to act as a table. Now, since I was in jail, there were no books. Why? There's no library.
Let's just pause there, about this sob story that Epstein is telling us about how he was in so-called solitary confinement for a few months. He mentions in passing his work release. First of all, it's well known and well documented that the prison authorities in the United States and elsewhere segregate pedophiles and other sex offenders from the general prison population, because the sex offenders, in particular the pedophiles, tend to fare very badly in the general prison population. They tend to be subjected to various forms of abuse, and even oftentimes are killed by other prisoners. And so when he was told that he was being put in a segregated cell away from the rest of the prison population for his own protection, there's no reason to believe that any of that was false and that this was intended to be some form of extreme punishment. In addition, he didn't elaborate on what his work release was. It has been widely reported that he was allowed to leave the prison for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and work from his office. You calling that solitary confinement?
No library, but you're in jail. No, I was in jail, not prison. So in jail, I was in a place what's called the Special Housing Unit, which is for the roughest, toughest, meanest people. They had put me there, they said, for my own protection. Mm-hmm. So I was in a 8x10 cell with a little slit in the door where they would serve my food on a tray about 9 inches by 4 inches. And then as soon as I finished eating, they would take the tray and close it down. And one of the guards said, do you understand there's Wall Street's crashing. I'm worried about my pension fund. What should I do? And I said, sorry, Wall Street's crashing? What's happened? And he said, there's some crisis and some companies are going bankrupt. I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah, it's all over the papers. We're all terrified we're going to lose our life savings because we have either a 401k or our pension funds. We don't know anything about money. Mr. Epstein, can you tell us, like, what's going on? Am I going to be able to afford my children's education? Am I going to be bankrupt like this company called Lehman Brothers? And there's another company in the front page today called Bear Stearns. Oh, no, I said. Why? Because that's the company I was a partner in. And in fact, that was a company I had a very large investment in. So,
again, no reference to the fact that he left that company after A, having lied about his education, and B, committed some unspecified regulatory violation.
There's a great story. I didn't have my Wall Street Journal, but in the early mornings, you're allowed to make 2 phone calls, collect. And when you pick up the phone, you can dial a number, and when the person picks up, they say, you're getting a call from the Palm Beach County Jail. Will you accept reverse charges? And the person either says yes, and the call goes through, or the person says no. The person I had called was Jimmy Kane, the president of Bear Stearns. And I said, tell me what's going on. And so that my knowledge of the financial crisis happened with Jimmy, who was at the center of the storm, telling me about what Lehman had gone under. And
okay, so let's get this straight here, folks. He's in jail after having committed a sex crime, pled guilty to a sex crime involving a minor, and he calls the head of Bear Stearns in the middle of the financial crisis from the jail cell, collect. And Jimmy Kane, who's grappling with the demise of the bank, which he was charged to manage competently and capably and for a lot of money, Kane takes the call from a prisoner who has been convicted of a sex crime involving a minor, and does so at this critically important moment in the great financial crisis. What does that say about Jimmy Kane and other people like him on Wall Street who are lionized by the press as the titans of finance and people, who should be admired for their ethics and their financial expertise?
And they were trying to figure out a way, should they bail out Bear Stearns?
Did it strike you at the time of the mess you had made of your life to be in a situation that you're one of the greatest financial minds in the world, looked at by world leaders and asked your thinking by the most prominent and important people in the world, and here you are in solitary confinement. You got to make a collect call to somebody. Did it strike you at the time how all the threads of your life had come together and put you in a position, or you had put yourself in that position?
Let's just pause there and note a couple of things here. And this is true of the entire 2-hour interview. At no point does Bannon say, in asking this question, does he put the spotlight on the victims? Does he express any kind of sympathy for Epstein's victims? When he affords to Epstein, as he did here and he does elsewhere, as I'm going to show you, the opportunity to express regret for his crimes, he frames it as a stupid mistake, which basically temporarily deprived Epstein of the opulent luxury and privileges that he had enjoyed up until his conviction. It's not presented, what he did, Epstein, as a crime against minors, as something that was morally reprehensible. It's just a stupid mistake that was not in Epstein's own interests. And secondarily, you'll note how Bannon is going to absolutely extraordinary lengths to place Epstein at the center of the financial universe. Here we are at the greatest financial crisis of our time. And according to Bannon, the most important people in finance and the capital markets were all desperately in need of Epstein's sage advice. So here's how Epstein responds to these ridiculous questions.
No.
So no, he wasn't at all regretful about what he had done.
So it never struck you when you had to make one of your 50% of your collect calls that day, you call the president or the head of the CEO of Bear Stearns, the biggest financial event in your life is taking place, of which one, every important person in the world would be seeking your opinion. Number two would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to apply your craft. Number three, it would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make money if you were smart, and obviously you're smart. You're telling me here, truthfully, that it never hit you at all of how you'd ended up in a place where you had to make a collect phone call from a jail cell that was 6x9 with a steel bed and your food being passed in through a slot.
The question you want to ask is, who was the other call to?
Okay. Who was the other call to?
The other call was to my friend at J.P. Morgan, who was then, I didn't know it at the time, trying to buy Bear Stearns. So at one point, I had two phones. It was difficult because they're afraid people are going to hang themselves with the phone cord. So they don't actually come together and they're pretty short. So I was actually going between two phones talking to Bear Stearns and J.P. Morgan at the same time.
Now, a few things about these latter comments. First of all, he's talking about these phone cords and, why they were so short and how that was a preventative measure for potentially suicidal inmates. Does Epstein come across to you there as somebody who was contemplating suicide while he was in jail? Is it credible that he, very quickly after he was arrested by the FBI in 2019, would have taken his own life? But quite apart from all that, he now tells us that in addition to speaking to Jimmy Kane at that particular moment on that day, he also called his friend from JP Morgan. Now, he doesn't specify in this 2-hour video, at least I didn't see it, maybe I missed it, but I'm pretty sure he said nothing about who this friend is. It is, however, widely known that Epstein was very close to a person by the name of Jess Staley, who at that time was a senior executive at JP Morgan, and who later became, by the way, the CEO of the British mega bank Barclays. There's every possibility that he's referring there to Jess Staley. Whoever it was, his friend at JP Morgan, given the company that Epstein kept, it's very likely to have been somebody who was on the management team and not some lower level trader. Epstein just didn't keep that kind of company by that point in his life. He was always hobnobbing with the bigwigs. And so it wasn't just Kane who took the call from this guy who's in a jail cell serving time for a sexual crime involving a minor. It was also somebody at J.P. Morgan who was probably Jess Staley, the future CEO of Barclays Bank. So again, what does this say about the titans of Wall Street and their ethical principles, if any? The final thing I want to say about this particular passage is one might argue that the fact that Jimmy Cain took this call at the height of the financial crisis from Epstein supports the contention that Epstein was a person of extraordinary financial acumen, or at least that Jimmy Cain saw him that way. But let's recall that Jimmy Cain presided over the destruction of Bear Stearns, a Wall Street institution. And if anything, we should infer from that this man was fabulously incompetent, and his judgments, therefore, about who is and is not a financial genius really don't carry any particular weight. Now, here's another example of Bannon going to extreme lengths to portray Epstein as a man of godlike financial sophistication.
You're the smartest guy in the room, right? You know that. Do you think there's anybody in the world today?
Oops, this is going to be a bad question.
No, but do you think anybody in the world today, the Alan Greenspans, the Bernankes, is there any central banker you know, any partner of any Wall Street firm, any guy running a trading desk, and I would take it that would be, or anybody at a Larry Fink at BlackRock, Steve Schwartzman at Blackstone, the top 100 financial guys, and let's throw in a couple of Nobel economists, and let's throw in the best professors at Wharton, at Harvard, at Stanford. Do you think that there's anybody that understands money or understands the world's financial system as good as you?
There must be.
But it doesn't come to the top of the head.
No.
Okay, fine.
So we're supposed to believe that this guy who lied about having 2 university degrees when in fact he had none, and who was turfed out of the Dalton School for poor performance, that he has a superior understanding of capital markets and the banking industry than the leaders of the major central banks and Nobel laureates and the CEOs of the largest hedge funds and financial institutions in the world. I mean, you've got to be kidding me, man. What evidence is there to back up that absolutely hyperbolic and extreme contention on the part of Bannon? Now, one of the things that Bannon does in this interview, he spends a good bit of time on this to buttress his constant harping on about Epstein's amazing financial acumen, is that he talks about the Santa Fe Institute and the fact that Epstein was affiliated with the Santa Fe Institute for a number of years. And so you may have never heard of it before. I didn't before I began to dig into the Epstein scandal, which suggests that it isn't a particularly famous research institute, but it's reported to be a theoretical research institute located in New Mexico and dedicated to the multidisciplinary study of the fundamental principles of complex adaptive systems, whatever the hell that means. Now, over the years, I'm willing to assume that some brilliant people worked at the Santa Fe Institute, but that doesn't prove that Epstein himself was brilliant. Epstein donated money to the Institute and had, moreover, a rather troubling relationship with its founder, a character by the name of Murray Gell-Mann. Now, 2 weeks ago, the Santa Fe, New Mexican newspaper published this article. I put the headline up on the screen about new revelations in the Epstein files, which concern Epstein's dealings with Gell-Mann and with the Santa Fe Institute. And I'm going to read some excerpts from this article so you can understand why we really shouldn't attach any weight to Epstein's association with this organization. The article states, various scientists with ties to the Santa Fe Institute arranged to meet Epstein at his ranch. This is the notorious New Mexico ranch, where it is widely believed on good grounds that heinous sexual crimes were committed there, and quite possibly murder as well. And this is according to records reviewed by the newspaper. Various scientists with ties to the Institute arranged to meet Epstein at his ranch. But his closest relationship, the article continues, appears to have been with co-founder Murray Gell-Mann, who won a Nobel Prize in physics and coined the term quark, for a type of elementary particle. Epstein helped fund Gell-Mann's research. Quote, I hope your life has returned to normal and is going well, close quote. Gell-Mann, who died in 2019, wrote to Epstein in June 2010, shortly after Epstein served a 13-month prison sentence on charges of soliciting a minor for prostitution. Epstein, in a typo-ridden email in July 2010, instructed someone who was trying to meet Gell-Mann to invoke their relationship. Quote, tell him we are close. You've been to the ranch, etc. Tell him you know he likes beautiful women. He will like that. Close quote. While the organization, again, I'm quoting from the article, while the organization has publicly acknowledged receiving $275,000 in donations from Epstein, financial records in the recently released Justice Department files, along with other public records, place that number much higher, at least $680,000. The organization said again this week its own records account for only $275,000 in donations from Epstein. Krakauer, I believe he's a representative of the organization, said it's important to note most of the funding Epstein gave through the Santa Fe Institute was specifically for Gell-Mann's research rather than the Institute as a whole, for the founder's research. Epstein completed 13 months of his 18-month sentence in Florida in 2009 and was on house arrest until mid-2010. In a July 2010 email released by the Justice Department, a writer whose name is redacted told Epstein about having breakfast with Gell-Mann. Gell-Mann said, quote, do you know I visited Jeff, close quote, according to the email. When asked whether he had any message for Epstein, Gell-Mann reportedly says, quote, tell him to fund my idea, close quote. 2 months later, Epstein assistants relayed a message to Epstein, quote, Murray is thrilled and thanks you for the $25,000 to travel around this year. He says he will call back who to write the check to. So, did the Santa Fe Institute legitimize Epstein because he was a brilliant mathematician, or did it legitimize him for money and sex? Now, in his interview with Bannon, Epstein tries real hard to sound like a financial genius himself. At one point, he tries to explain, and this is just an example of his attempts to portray himself in this manner. He tries to explain the concept of fractionalized banking.
There's a fundamental part of money, which is called fractionalized banking. And fractionalized banking is something that finance people understand, and the people on the street, and when I say people on the street, that's where I was when I started on Wall Street, would find it impossible to believe. Impossible. Why? Bannon Bank, I give you $1, just one single dollar. In our system of banking, I would say, okay, Steve, I gave you $1. How much could you lend out to your friends? And your natural reaction would be probably something less than $1 because I want to keep something in my pocket. The way our system works is if you as a bank are holding my dollar, you can lend out an additional $8 or $9. No, it's impossible. I only have $1, Jeffrey. We have something called fractionalized reserves, which is if you have 1, you can lend out 9.
Yeah, so tell me something I don't know. As I've mentioned in the past, I started my legal career in the 1990s on Wall Street. I worked for a firm by the name of Sullivan & Cromwell. It's quite easy to check it out yourself if you care to do that. Many people in the legal profession, the banking industry, consider it to be the top Wall Street law firm, quite arguably the top corporate law firm in the world. Certainly, it is generally agreed that it's one of the very best in the world. I don't say that in order to, toot my own horn. I just want to point out here that I know a thing or two about banking law and banking regulation and how the financial industry works. I not only started my career on Wall Street, I then became a securities lawyer, and for quite a number of years in Canada, was leading the prosecution of class actions against public companies for securities fraud and other forms of market manipulation and corporate misconduct. So I know a thing or two about these matters, and I can tell you that nothing that Epstein said in this interview or on any other occasion about fractionalized banking or any other aspect of the financial system was news to me. And it's not just me. I'm quite confident that the many people who over the years have done the kind of work that I did on Wall Street and later on as a securities class actions lawyer understand these things every bit as well as I do, if not better than I do. So I'm not the only person out there who gets it. There's a whole bunch of people all over the world who get it by virtue of their experience in the industry or by virtue of their academic training. The bottom line is you yourself could go online, do a quick research, a simple Google search on fractionalized banking, and find out, for example, from a Wikipedia entry, exactly what Epstein just said. There's nothing extraordinary about the knowledge that this man exhibits in this interview or in any other interview that I've ever seen. To this day, I would say there's zero evidence that Epstein was a person of extraordinary intellectual capacity. He never authored, as far as I know, any peer-reviewed article, not a single one. He never proved a complex mathematical theorem. He never made a significant and identifiable contribution to any scientific field of study or inquiry. And I also should note, before I move on to other aspects of this interview, that Harold Levin, who was a financial advisor for a number of years to Les Wexner, and that he is the billionaire Wexner who is most closely associated with Jeffrey Epstein. When Wexner was first introduced to Epstein and then decided shortly thereafter to hire him as a financial advisor, Harold Levin went to meet with Epstein, spent some time with Epstein in his office, and came away with the idea that Epstein was a con man. And he said, Epstein was Harold Levin reported this to Vanity Fair. In his first meeting with Epstein was pontificating about some aspect of the financial markets. And Levin, who was quite sophisticated in these matters, couldn't make out a damn thing from what Epstein was saying. And that's one of the reasons, and not the only one, why he came away thinking that the man was a con. So as far as I can tell, this entire narrative about Epstein's financial and mathematical genius is a fabrication whose obvious purpose is to explain why so many powerful and accomplished men befriended Epstein, and in some cases even gave fabulous amounts of money to the depraved pedophile. In his interview of Epstein, Bannon does more than try to make Epstein look like a savant. He also tries to give Epstein an opportunity to express regret. I've already shown you one instance of that. But again, it's important to note that Bannon doesn't express sympathy for any of Epstein's victims. Instead, he characterizes Epstein's crimes as a stupid mistake which temporarily deprived Epstein of all the privileges he had enjoyed before his brief imprisonment. So here is another excerpt from the interview where Bannon affords to Epstein an opportunity to express regret.
My life today is incredible.
Do you consider yourself a stoic?
No, I consider myself a hermit. Stoics are not very happy.
Being a hermit then, being in that 6x9 cell, being in the cell, qua the cell was not the problem, right?
Correct.
What was the problem?
Eating the almond joy bars.
Yeah. The problem wasn't that he had committed heinous crimes against minors, that he was a sick pedophile. That wasn't the problem. The problem was he had to eat a shitty chocolate bar for a few months.
Because you couldn't eat the food.
No, right. But remember, my life is.
Did that ever strike you that I can't eat the food because somebody might have done something to it? I gotta live off an almond joy bar, one a day or two a day or whatever. How many ever sneak in a day?
No sneaking in.
Your one almond joy bar, it did not hit you at some time? How the fuck did I do this?
No.
No. Pause. At that stage, you would think that Bannon, if he had any decency, would say, that's sick. Like you actually didn't feel any sympathy for your victims. Bannon is all too willing to heap praise upon Epstein and paint him out as being, the greatest financial genius of the modern era, but condemning him outright for his utter lack of remorse for what he did, that seems to be beneath Bannon. And in this regard, I have to bring up the painful case of Noam Chomsky, painful to me personally and so many other people who have discovered that Chomsky was very close to the depraved pedophile for a number of years before Chomsky himself became incapacitated. Chomsky wrote in explaining, before the full details of his relationship were known with Epstein, he talked about his own belief in the concept of rehabilitation for criminal offenders. And people who are rehabilitated should have the slate wiped clean and should be reintegrated into society and given an opportunity to have normal social relationships and so forth. Now, in principle, I completely agree with that sentiment. I believe that the priority of the criminal justice system should be rehabilitation in respect of those who can be rehabilitated. And I think most criminal offenders can be rehabilitated. And I criticize our so-called justice system for prioritizing punishment and exploiting people who are in prison by paying them pennies for doing menial work, laborious menial work, basically using them as slave labor, and all the other abuses of the so-called justice system. I'm all for prioritizing rehabilitation, and I'm all for cleaning the slate for criminal offenders who are genuinely rehabilitated. But there are some people who are not rehabilitated by the system. There are some people, although they may well be a small minority of the prison population, who can never be rehabilitated. One thing is damn clear about Jeffrey Epstein. He was not rehabilitated. There's no indication, I've never heard a word of remorse come out of that man's mouth, either in the interviews he's done or in his written communications with people, not an iota of remorse. So how Chomsky could justify to himself, his relationship with this man utterly escapes me. And I remain convinced, especially after seeing this interview, that Chomsky has not proffered any remotely credible, persuasive explanation for why he became so close to Jeffrey Epstein in the latter years of Epstein's life. Now, toward the end of this Bannon interview, Bannon asks Epstein if his money is dirty. And this is what happened.
Your money dirty money?
If you live,
I just asked a question. Is your money dirty money?
No, it's not. So, in fact,
why is it not dirty money?
Because I earned it.
But you earned it.
I earned it legally.
We went back to this before. You earned
Yes.
it. You earned it advising the worst people in the world, right?
Let's just stop right there. Even if he earned it legitimately, that doesn't in any way, shape, or form excuse what he did. And furthermore, even if it was earned entirely legitimately, it should all be transferred to the hundreds of women that he trafficked and abused as compensation. It doesn't matter how he earned the money when it comes to the question of whether he should compensate his victims. The man died, if in fact he died in 2019, according to his executors, with a net worth in excess of $500 million. So right up until the very end of his stinking life, the man was living in opulent luxury, and he never actually came even remotely close to making amends from a financial perspective for what he did to his many, many victims.
Do enormous bad things, and just to make more money.
I just want to stop there too and say Bannon is saying, he's not raising the question whether this is true. He's saying straight up, you made money by advising the worst people who did the worst things. That's what Bannon says. Well, how does Bannon know that? How does he know that they did the worst things? And who are these people? And notice that in response to this question, Epstein never denies that the people from whom he earned money, according to him, legitimately, were the worst people who did the worst things. He just proceeds on the basis that Bannon is correct.
So instead of asking me the question, should you take the money? Because I think it's a legitimate question.
You think it's a legitimate question?
Yes, no
Why?
question. Because because I think about, I think you have to, ethics is always a complicated subject, but I can tell you that with the money I gave to help try to eradicate polio in Pakistan and India, instead of asking me whether that money should be given to these children for vaccines, I think you might want to ask their mothers who received the vaccine, who know their child now won't get polio, and ask them if Epstein should have helped these people.
Is your money?
Yeah, so no one, I think, with a sense of decency is going to complain about the fact that, some people who needed a polio vaccine were able to get it because Epstein shared some of his dirty money with them. The question here is whether any of that excuses in any way, shape, or form what Epstein did. Just because he took some small part of his wealth and gave it to people who were legitimately in need of the money doesn't mean that he is a decent person, that he should have been in decent company, that he should have lived in a life of opulent luxury, and that he had no obligation to compensate his victims to the fullest of his ability. This is just, one of the many ways in which it's not just Epstein, but so many wealthy people, all of whom, at the end of the day, have dirty money. You can't be a billionaire, have the money, even the kind of money that Epstein had. He was often called a billionaire, but apparently he only had, $580 million when he died. In any case, you can't accumulate that kind of money without doing dirty things. That's just the practical reality. And you don't get to whitewash your own crimes and sins by, throwing a few crumbs to the poor now and then. I'm not buying that, and frankly, neither should anybody else. So how does Bannon, again, know that Epstein earned his money by advising people who did the worst things? I don't think he could know that without actually knowing who these people are. Now, here's a humble suggestion for the FBI. Maybe you should question Bannon about this. Ask him what people he was referring to and what did he mean by the worst things. But there's no indication that the FBI, even though they're in possession of this video and the DOJ released it, have any interest in questioning this pervert Bannon about how he knew these things. Notice as well that when Bannon says to Epstein that he earned his money by advising people who did the worst things, Epstein, as I mentioned, proceeds to answer the question as though the premise is accurate. Now, another eye-popping part of this interview is that at one point, Bannon compares Epstein to Socrates. In the excerpt I'm about to show you, Bannon gives Epstein another opportunity to express regret for his actions, and yet again, Epstein declines to do so. But it's the part about Socrates that really struck me.
Is that the moment of clarity that you had about science and Newtonian physics and everything that we can measure is really not going to be the way we go forward? It's going to be much more esoteric, emotional intelligence thing. Was that your moment of clarity?
I wish it was, because it would make such a great story for this interview, but it's not. It's the fact that I lead such a privileged life to come across
But when did you?
This is 2019, by which time Epstein had trafficked and or abused over 1,200 victims. And he's telling you straight up, in that year, at that point in his life, he leads such a privileged life.
It didn't happen then. When did it, or did it happen before?
I was going to hopefully get to the.
Okay.
I'm in a privileged position to have some of the world's smartest people come to my house and tell me what they think about different subjects. And I finally realized that the thing that they had most in common was there was this area, no matter how smart they were, that when I asked them the questions, they said they'd have to resort to a 500 or 1,000-year-old response to that question, which was, I don't know.
You know who else found that out? Socrates. That's what Socrates kept doing, right? Socrates kept asking all the experts. He would go through, question after question after question, and realize at the end they didn't really know. They really didn't basically understand what they were talking about.
And one of the things that people won't enjoy, it turns out that potentially one of the bad things to teach children is how to write. So writing, reading, and arithmetic was supposed to be, everyone's supposed to be taught, but writing forces you into a very narrow channel of.
I mean, this man's a genius. He thinks children shouldn't be taught how to write. And by the way, if you look at his emails, it should be abundantly clear that this fool has no idea how to write. But let's go back to this reference to Socrates. Why did that really stand out for me? Because as anyone who has a passing familiarity with Socrates' life will know, he was ultimately required by powerful men to take his own life. You remember the story about Socrates drinking hemlock and dying after a jury of his Athenian peers sentenced him to death? Now, according to US authorities, that's exactly what Epstein did a few months after this interview. He took his own life. So I wonder, did Epstein die like Socrates? Did the powerful men who associated with him require him in some way to take his own life? Did Bannon know something at that time that few, if any, other people knew? Certainly, Epstein's death must have brought a sigh of relief to many powerful men. Now, that brings us finally to the place where we began this report, and that is Bannon's question to Epstein about whether Epstein is the devil.
To your child's life.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question.
Sorry.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Because you have all the attributes. You're incredibly smart. You remember the devil is
Was
somebody
the devil
knows
smart?
The devil's brilliant. You read Milton's Paradise Lost.
No, the devil scares me.
Satan is at the number 1 or 2 archangel, and the reason he goes to hell and leads the rebellion is because he can't be the top guy. And his thing is, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven.
I saw that in a movie once called American Dharma. I don't remember who said it. Okay, we have to go.
Okay, good.
Okay.
That was good.
Yeah, when they're asking you whether you're the devil and you are the world's most notorious pedophile, that's pretty good time to wrap up the interview and say you got to go. Now, in light of Epstein's alleged death, the question, in my view, which we should all be asking is not whether Epstein is the devil. The question we should be asking is whether Epstein's wealthy and powerful friends are the devil. And many of those friends continue to occupy positions of wealth and power. One of them, of course, is none other than Steve Bannon. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal on February 26, 2026.